The
I
day my
never thought I'd be
grandmother's
here,
estate was
sitting in a
settled,
room like
I
this,
sat in a
telling my story.
mahogany-paneled law
It feels
office in
like just
Naples,
yesterday
Florida.
I was learning
The
how to
air
hold a
conditioning
pen.
hummed quietly against the
I
heavy summer
understand the
heat
gravity of
outside.
this situation.
Across the polished
She has
conference
to
table
sign.
sat my parents,
I
Thomas
will
and
not be
Cynthia.
pressured.
They sat close
The
together,
time has finally
projecting an
come.
image of unified grief that vanished
We
the
couldn't be
moment the lawyer
prouder.
opened his leather folder.
Remember the sacrifices that
Next
were
to them
made.
sat my older brother, Preston. He wore a custom-tailored suit he had purchased on a high-interest credit card just a week prior. He spent the entire morning checking his reflection in his dark phone screen. For
Look at
2
that
years, my
face. You're gonna
parents had
lose everything.
isolated my grandmother. They took over her medical care and restricted her visitors. They screened her phone
I
calls
found
and
it.
dismissed her lifelong friends.
It's exactly where the map
They
said.
played the role of devoted caretakers while quietly positioning themselves to control her final assets. The lawyer cleared his throat and adjusted his reading glasses. He
I
read
never
the
imagined
primary
it would be possible
stipulations
to
of the
find that
will.
kind of happiness.
The room grew
Not after
very
everything.
still. He announced that
sometimes
Preston was
life
awarded the
surprises you.
entirety of my grandmother's liquid assets. The portfolio totaled $7 million in municipal bonds and private cash accounts. Cynthia placed a proud hand on Preston's shoulder. Thomas offered a slow, approving nod to his son. They looked at him like he had just achieved something extraordinary. They did not look my way. The lawyer turned a crisp white page. He looked at me across the table. He announced I was inheriting the estate in the rural marshlands of Central Florida. He read the property description aloud. The land had been abandoned for over a decade. The roof of the main house was sagging. The surrounding acreage was mostly untamed swamp water and climbing vines. Preston let out a loud, mocking laugh. The sound bounced harshly off the wood paneling. He leaned back in his heavy chair and crossed his arms. He asked what I was going to do with a rotting wooden shack full of mold. He suggested I could start a swamp tour business for tourists. Cynthia hid a smirk behind her manicured hand. Thomas shook his head, acting as if my inheritance was a tragic but fitting outcome for a daughter who never lived up to his rigid standards. I did not react. I did not demand a fair share of the liquid capital or accuse them of manipulation. I just reached across the polished table and picked up the metal pen. The ink flowed smoothly as I signed my name on the designated signature line. I placed the pen back on the table. I stood up, smoothed the front of my gray blazer, and walked out of the law office without saying a single word to any of them. Before we go any further, if this kind of family betrayal hits close to home, take a second to hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and the local time in the comments below. I want to know where you are tuning in from today. Have you ever watched a golden child receive everything while you were handed the scraps? Let me know down below. My name is Maria Cook. I am 28 years old, and I am a title examiner for commercial real estate in Florida. I spend my days reading property deeds, navigating zoning laws, and finding the hidden value in overlooked land. What my family did not realize that afternoon was that handing a trained title examiner a piece of historic real estate is like handing a loaded weapon to a sniper. The immediate aftermath of the will reading was swift. I lived in a modest apartment in Naples. Years ago, when I was a struggling college student, my parents co-signed the lease. They held that signature over my head for years. 2 days after Preston received his inheritance, my phone rang. It was my landlord. Thomas had formally removed his name as a guarantor and paid the penalty to terminate the lease agreement early. My parents were intentionally rendering me homeless to force me into the decaying Florida property. They wanted to humiliate me. They wanted me to experience the desperation of poverty while Preston shopped for a luxury yacht in Miami. They assumed I would crawl back to them begging for a loan. I did not crawl. I packed my belongings into cardboard boxes and loaded them into the trunk of my sedan. I drove 3 hours north, leaving the manicured lawns of Naples behind. The paved roads turned to dirt as I entered the dense humidity of the Florida interior. The estate was exactly as they described it. The front porch was covered in thick green vines. The wooden steps groaned under my weight. The air inside smelled of stagnant water and old dust. The paint peeled from the walls in long curled strips. Most people would have turned around and drove away. But I am an examiner. I look at the foundation of a property, not the cosmetic decay. I unlocked the heavy front door and stepped inside. I spent the first week clearing out decades of accumulated debris. I opened all the windows to let the humid breeze push the stale air out. I scrubbed the hardwood floors until my hands ached. On the seventh day, I was inspecting the structural integrity of the master bedroom closet. The space felt cramped. I tapped the baseboards and listened to the hollow echo. I pulled a measuring tape from my belt. The interior dimensions of the closet did not align with the exterior architectural footprint. There was a false wall. I retrieved a crowbar from my toolbox. I wedged the flat metal edge under a loose floorboard and applied pressure. The wood splintered and gave way. Tucked beneath the framing was a heavy steel lockbox. My grandmother was a meticulous woman who grew up during hard economic times. She never fully trusted banks. I forced the rusted lock open with the crowbar. The metal snapped. Inside the dark box, I found a stack of pristine legal documents and a handwritten letter. The envelope was addressed directly to me. I unfolded the thick paper and read her elegant cursive handwriting. She wrote that she knew Thomas and Cynthia had been stealing from her accounts for years. She knew they used her money to fund their failing business ventures. She knew they groomed Preston to take the rest of her wealth. The next paragraph made my pulse steady into a slow, deliberate rhythm. She explained that the $7 million was not a gift. It was a carefully constructed trap. My family thought they had secured generational wealth. They had no idea my grandmother had orchestrated the perfect distribution of justice, and they had just walked right into the snare. Senior Echo here, stepping in to validate your feelings about toxic family dynamics. We are going to explore how manipulators use financial abuse to control their targets. Tell me in the comments down below what city you are tuning in from today. Have you ever watched a golden child receive everything while you were handed the scraps? Let me know your experiences. Maria does not scream when her family hands her a crumbling house. She knows raw emotion only gives manipulators the fuel they need. The immediate aftermath of the will reading is swift and brutal. My parents intentionally render me homeless to force me into the decaying Florida property. They want to humiliate me while Preston shops for a luxury yacht. I pack my belongings into my sedan and drive north into the dense humidity of the interior marshlands. The drive takes 3 hours. The paved highways of Naples gradually fade into cracked asphalt roads lined with towering cypress trees. Spanish moss hangs from the branches, casting long shadows across my windshield. I turn onto a dirt driveway, obscured by overgrown palmetto bushes. My sedan tires crunch against the gravel as I shift the car into park. The engine ticks as it cools in the stifling afternoon heat. I step out of the vehicle and look at my inheritance. The main house leans slightly to the left. The wooden porch is consumed by thick invasive vines that crawl up the wooden pillars. The paint peels in long, jagged strips, revealing the gray, weathered wood beneath. The air smells of damp earth and stagnant swamp water. A normal person would look at this structure and feel a crushing sense of defeat. A normal person would see a worthless burden. But I am a commercial title examiner. I do not look at cosmetic decay. I look at the foundation. I look at the bones of a property to determine its true value. I retrieve a heavy metal flashlight and a toolbox from my trunk. I walk up the wooden steps, listening to the boards groan under my weight. I unlock the front door and push it open. The interior is a time capsule of forgotten memories covered in a thick layer of dust. The silence is profound. For the first week, I focus entirely on clearing the debris. I open every window to let the humid breeze push the stale air out of the rooms. I scrub the hardwood floors until my shoulders ache. The physical labor clears my mind and allows me to focus on the task ahead. On the seventh day, I move my inspection to the master bedroom. I kneel on the floor, scanning the perimeter of the room. I enter the closet and run my flashlight along the baseboards. My professional training dictates a strict attention to detail. I notice a discrepancy in the measurements. The interior dimensions of the closet do not align with the exterior architectural footprint. There is a gap, a false space hidden between the floor joints. I pull a steel crowbar from my toolbox. I wedge the flat metal edge under a loose floorboard and apply steady downward pressure. The ancient wood splinters and gives way with a sharp cracking sound. I shine my flashlight into the dark cavity beneath the framing. Resting in the dust is a heavy steel lockbox. My grandmother grew up during a harsh economic era. She never placed her full trust in traditional banking institutions. I drag the lockbox out of the hidden compartment and set it on the bedroom floor. The lock is rusted solid. I use the crowbar to strike the mechanism. The metal shatters on the third impact. I open the heavy lid. Inside the dark compartment, I find a stack of pristine legal documents and a handwritten letter. The envelope is addressed directly to me. I unfold the thick paper and read her elegant cursive handwriting. She writes that she knew Thomas and Cynthia had been stealing from her accounts for years. She tracked their unauthorized withdrawals. She knew they used her money to fund their failing business ventures while maintaining an illusion of wealth. She knew they groomed Preston to take the rest of her fortune. The next paragraph makes my pulse steady into a slow, deliberate rhythm. She explains that the $7 million Preston inherited is not a gift. It is a carefully constructed trap. I set the letter down and pick up the stack of legal documents. I spread them out across the clean hardwood floor. The papers are federal tax audits and corporate banking ledgers spanning 2 decades. I review the financial records and the genius of her vengeance becomes clear. The $7 million Preston received is not clean liquid capital. The funds are tied directly to a complex network of offshore shell companies my grandmother established many years ago. She intentionally allowed those specific accounts to accrue staggering federal tax liabilities. The Internal Revenue Service is already auditing the paper trail. By signing the inheritance paperwork, Preston assumed full legal liability for the entire portfolio. The ledgers indicate he now owes the federal government over $9 million in unpaid taxes and evasion penalties. The money is a poisoned chalice. My grandmother understood the exact psychological profile of her grandson. She knew Preston was far too arrogant to hire a forensic accountant to audit the inheritance before accepting it. He never worked a real job in his life. He views money as an infinite resource provided by his parents. She knew he would immediately begin transferring the dirty funds into his personal checking accounts to buy sports cars and luxury real estate. She knew his reckless spending would trigger an automated federal investigation. My family thinks they have secured generational wealth, but my grandmother actually handed them a federal indictment. I place the banking ledgers back into the lockbox. I do not pick up my phone to warn them. I do not owe them my protection. I let the trap remain armed and waiting in the shadows. I turn my attention back to the crumbling estate surrounding me. My grandmother did not leave me this specific property just to watch me struggle in the swamp. She left me the lockbox to explain the trap, but she left me the land to secure my future. I reach into the bottom of the steel box and pull out the original property deeds. I open my laptop and connect to a mobile cellular hotspot. I access the county database using my professional credentials. I type the parcel numbers into the search bar. The estate sits on 50 acres of undeveloped marshland. To the naked eye, it is a worthless swamp. But my title examination reveals a critical zoning variance filed 40 years ago. I read the scanned digital documents on my screen. The land possesses a permanent commercial zoning designation. Furthermore, it holds unlimited commercial water rights to a natural underground aquifer located directly beneath the foundation of this decaying house. I open a new browser tab and cross-reference the current county development plans. The pieces of the puzzle snap into place. A major international beverage corporation is currently attempting to purchase land in this exact county. They want to build a new state-of-the-art water purification facility. For 2 years, their corporate lawyers have been blocked by strict local environmental zoning laws. They cannot break ground on their industrial project. My rotting wooden shack sits squarely on the only parcel of land legally cleared for their facility. The commercial water rights attached to my deed bypass all the local bureaucratic hurdles. The estate is not a burden. It is the most valuable piece of commercial real estate in Central Florida. I am sitting on a gold mine. I close my laptop and listen to the sound of the wind moving through the cypress trees outside. My grandmother orchestrated the perfect distribution of justice. She gave the greedy predators the illusion of a fortune that will destroy them. She gave the discarded daughter the quiet, hidden asset that will secure a permanent legacy. A month passes in total silence. I continue restoring the interior of the house, while the federal tax trap ticks down in the background. Then my phone rings on a Tuesday afternoon. The caller identification displays the name Thomas Cook. His tone is drastically different from the day of the will reading. The arrogant dismissal is gone. He speaks with a sickly sweet paternal warmth. The sudden shift in his behavior tells me everything I need to know. Someone from the beverage corporation contacted him assuming he still controls the family assets. Thomas discovered the true value of the land, and the game is about to change. The phone vibrates against the wooden kitchen counter. The screen illuminates with my father's name. I let the device ring 3 times before sliding my finger across the glass to answer. Thomas Cook does not usually call me during business hours unless he requires a favor. His voice comes through the speaker sounding remarkably upbeat. He asks how the swamp is treating me. He uses a tone of manufactured paternal concern that makes my skin crawl. He says he and Cynthia have been losing sleep worrying about my financial situation. He claims the rural property is a severe tax burden for a single woman on a modest salary. He pivots smoothly to his proposed solution. He tells me he wants to help me get back on my feet. He offers to buy the estate from me for $50,000. He frames the transaction as an act of parental charity. I stand in the dusty kitchen and process the manipulation. A month ago, he co-signed my eviction notice to render me homeless. Now he is offering a cash buyout. The beverage corporation executive definitely called his office. Thomas knows the land sits on a multi-million-dollar aquifer. He wants to purchase the deed for pennies before I figure out the commercial zoning variants. I keep my breathing steady. I tell him the property is not for sale. The paternal warmth vanishes instantly. His voice drops into a harsh, authoritative register. He demands I stop being stubborn. He insists the title is legally complicated and requires his expertise to untangle. He tries to manufacture panic. I do not argue with his logic. I do not reveal what I found in the lockbox. I simply tell him to lose my number and I end the call. Silence deprives a manipulator of the friction they need to operate. I place the phone face down on the counter. The game is escalating. Thomas Cook built his entire identity on the illusion of control. Growing up in Naples, I watched him run his household like a ruthless corporate boardroom. If Preston failed a college course, my father bribed the academic administration with a generous donation. If I earned a perfect score on a state examination, he ignored it because my achievements did not serve his ego. Cynthia enabled every single tyrannical decision. She decorated their home with expensive imported furniture and hosted lavish dinner parties to project an image of untouchable wealth. They worshipped leverage. I know hanging up on him is a declaration of war. A narcissist does not accept rejection. They escalate. I spend the next 48 hours preparing for the inevitable ambush. I do not waste time feeling anxious. I use my professional skills to fortify my position. I pull the digital property records and verify my clean legal ownership. I check the county trespassing statutes. I make sure my front gate is locked, but I know a simple padlock will not stop a man who believes he owns everything he sees. 2 days later, a black luxury sport utility vehicle turns onto my dirt driveway. The heavy tires crush the overgrown palmetto leaves. The vehicle comes to a halt near the sagging front porch. The engine shuts off and the doors open. My family steps out into the suffocating humidity of the Florida marshland. Preston emerges from the passenger side wearing designer sunglasses and a pressed linen shirt. He looks around the property with undisguised disgust, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. He checks his expensive watch, acting as if being in my presence is a terrible inconvenience. Cynthia steps out next, wearing a pale pink silk blouse that is highly inappropriate for the rural environment. Thomas walks around the front of the vehicle carrying a sleek leather briefcase. He marches toward the wooden steps with the posture of a conquering general. I step out the front door and stand on the porch. I do not offer a greeting. Thomas climbs the steps and stops a few feet away from me. He unlatches his briefcase and pulls out a crisp white document. It is a formal quitclaim deed. He holds a gold pen out toward me. He abandons the fake parental concern he used on the phone. He reverts to his true nature. He orders me to sign the paper immediately. He claims my grandmother made a clerical error in her final days. He insists the rural estate was always meant to be part of Preston's inheritance portfolio. He tells me I am holding up a vital real estate transaction and causing the family unnecessary stress. Cynthia steps up behind him and deploys her weaponized guilt. She tells me to stop being selfish. She sighs heavily and claims my stubborn behavior is exacerbating her blood pressure. She plays the role of the long-suffering mother trying to manage a rebellious child. Preston leans against the wooden porch railing and laughs. He tells me to take the $50,000 before they change their minds and leave me to rot in the swamp. They stand in a semicircle around me. They expect me to fold under the coordinated social pressure. They assume the physical presence of my entire family will trigger my childhood conditioning. They want me to panic cry and sign the document just to restore peace. I look at the quitclaim deed. I look at the gold pen. I do not reach for either of them. I look directly into my father's eyes. I keep my voice devoid of any emotion. I tell him I will not sign his paper. I inform him that he has exactly 30 seconds to turn around and walk off my property before I dial the county sheriff to have all three of them arrested for trespassing. The air on the porch turns to ice. The arrogant smirk vanishes from Preston's face. Cynthia gasps and covers her mouth with her manicured hand. Thomas freezes. He has never experienced blatant defiance from me. His face flushes a deep shade of crimson. The veins in his neck become visible against his collar. He shoves the quitclaim deed back into his briefcase. He points a trembling finger inches from my face. The mask of the sophisticated businessman shatters, revealing the desperate predator underneath. He threatens to drag me into a brutal civil court battle. He promises to hire the most expensive probate lawyers in the state of Florida. He claims he will contest the will and prove my grandmother was suffering from severe dementia. He tells me he will present medical testimony demonstrating that I manipulated a sick old woman on her deathbed. He vows to tie the estate up in so much protracted litigation that the legal fees will force me into permanent bankruptcy. He tells me I am nothing without his protection. He promises to destroy my professional reputation as the title examiner. He screams that I will regret the day I ever crossed him. I do not flinch. I stand perfectly still and watch him unravel. A man who resorts to screaming is a man who has run out of leverage. Thomas realizes his threats are not working. He turns around and marches down the wooden steps. Cynthia follows him, casting one final resentful glare in my direction. Preston scrambles back into the luxury vehicle, eager to escape the suffocating heat and the tension. The tires spin in the dirt, launching gravel into the air as they speed down the narrow road. The dust settles over the marshland. The silence returns to the estate. My family thinks the threat of a protracted legal war will break my spirit. They think I will spend the night pacing the floor in a panic and call them the next morning to surrender the deed. They fundamentally misunderstand who they are dealing with. I navigate complex property disputes for a living. I walk back inside the house and lock the heavy wooden door. I sit down at my kitchen table and open my laptop. I begin preparing my legal defense. I know they are walking into a slaughter, and the federal government is about to spring the trap on their golden boy. The night after my family fled the estate, I sit alone at my wooden kitchen table. The humid Florida air presses against the window panes. A single lamp illuminates the dark room, casting long shadows across the floorboards. Beside my laptop rests the heavy steel lockbox I pulled from the hidden closet compartment weeks ago. To build my defense against my father's impending lawsuit, I must understand every intricate detail of the weapon my grandmother left me. I reach inside the rusted metal casing and retrieve her handwritten letter. The elegant cursive script details her profound understanding of family psychology. She watched Thomas and Cynthia steal from her accounts for years. She observed how they groomed my older brother to inherit the remaining fortune. She knew Preston possessed a lethal combination of unearned confidence and staggering incompetence. Growing up, Preston was enrolled in elite private academies. He rarely attended classes and never studied. Whenever he failed an examination, Thomas wrote a generous check to the school administration to secure a passing grade. Cynthia constantly praised his mediocre achievements, creating a protective bubble of delusion around him. She purchased him expensive vehicles and luxury clothing to ensure he always looked the part of a successful heir. This lifetime of enabling produced a man incapable of critical thought. Preston views wealth as an inherent right rather than a tangible responsibility. My grandmother explains in the letter her certainty that he would never hire a forensic accountant or a tax attorney to audit the inheritance portfolio. He would see a $7 million balance on a piece of paper and blindly sign the acceptance forms. He would ignore the fine print. I set the fragile paper down on the table. I pick up the stack of legal documents resting at the bottom of the lockbox. These are not standard probate forms or simple bank statements. They are thick-bound corporate ledgers and federal tax audits. I spread the pages out across the wood surface. My professional training as a title examiner requires me to trace complex financial histories and uncover hidden liabilities. I follow the paper trail, and the brilliant scope of her vengeance becomes clear. The $7 million Preston inherited is not clean liquid capital resting in a domestic checking account. The funds are tied directly to a complex network of offshore shell companies. My grandmother established these foreign entities in the late 1990s, using a series of blind trusts. For over 2 decades, she intentionally allowed those specific accounts to accrue severe federal tax liabilities. She deliberately ignored the compliance notices mailed to her attorneys. She let the evasion penalties multiply year after year. I traced the columns of numbers written on the most recent Internal Revenue Service notice. The principal amount held in the offshore accounts is $7 million. The unpaid taxes and accumulated fraud penalties total over $9 million. The federal government is already tracking the routing numbers. The Treasury Department was simply waiting for a designated beneficiary to claim the assets and establish domestic legal jurisdiction. By signing the inheritance paperwork, Preston legally bound himself to the shell companies. He assumed full liability for the entire portfolio. The money is a poisoned chalice. My grandmother handed him a debt he can never repay. I open my laptop and access public property registries to verify my theory. My grandmother's prediction is unfolding flawlessly in real time. Public records indicate Preston recently closed on a luxury waterfront condominium in Miami. He financed a fleet of imported sports cars. To fund this extravagant lifestyle, he is routing the dirty offshore funds directly into domestic banking channels. Every single wire transfer acts as a digital flare signaling the federal government. He is spending stolen federal funds to buy designer watches and expensive real estate. His reckless consumption is triggering automated audits across multiple federal agencies. My family thinks they are stepping into high society, but they are actually walking straight into a criminal indictment. I carefully stack the ledgers and place them back into the lockbox. I close the heavy steel lid. I do not pick up my phone to warn them. I let the trap remain armed and waiting in the dark. 4 days pass in quiet isolation. I continue restoring the estate, replacing rotted floorboards and clearing the overgrown palmetto bushes from the driveway. The physical labor keeps my mind sharp. On a Thursday afternoon, I hear tires crunching against the gravel. A plain white sedan parks near the front porch. A man in a cheap suit steps out holding a thick manila envelope. He walks up the wooden steps and asks to confirm my identity. I nod. He hands me the envelope and drives away. Thomas followed through on his threat. The civil lawsuit is officially filed in the county court. I take the envelope inside and spread the petition across my kitchen table. The legal filing is a masterpiece of fabricated narrative. Thomas is demanding the court invalidate the property transfer. He claims my grandmother lacked testamentary capacity during her final months. He alleges that I isolated a sick elderly woman and manipulated her into altering the deed to the rural estate. He hired a premium probate firm in Naples to draft the documents. The petition includes a sworn affidavit from a hired medical consultant who never even met my grandmother. My father intends to bury me under a mountain of expensive legal motions. He wants to drain my modest savings, forcing me to hire a defense attorney I cannot afford. He assumes the financial pressure will force me to surrender the land to him in a pretrial settlement. He is treating me like one of his hostile business acquisitions. He is looking the wrong way. He is pouring his remaining resources into stealing a patch of rural wetlands while standing directly on a financial landmine. I do not panic. I do not call a defense attorney. I represent myself. I spend the weekend drafting my legal response. I gather the verified land surveys proving my clean title. I retrieve a certified medical evaluation my grandmother completed just days before her passing. The evaluation was conducted by a reputable neurologist, proving her undeniable mental competence. I place the medical records, the property deeds, and the handwritten letter into a sleek leather briefcase. While I prepare my defense, I continue monitoring the Federal Asset Registry databases. The timeline is accelerating faster than I anticipated. Preston's erratic wire transfers have alerted the Treasury Department. The offshore accounts are flagged. The federal mechanisms are locking into place. Agents are building their prosecution file while my brother sips expensive champagne on a rented yacht. A court date is scheduled for the following week. Thomas and Cynthia are likely celebrating in Naples, believing their expensive lawyers will secure an easy victory. They think they are about to strip me of my only asset and leave me destitute in the swamp. They are preparing to walk into a sterile courtroom, expecting a swift surrender. They do not realize I am bringing the undeniable receipts to dismantle their entire fraudulent existence. The tension in the air is palpable as I lock my front door and begin the long drive south toward the courthouse. The real storm is gathering over Miami, and the federal agents are finally making their move. After sealing my legal defense strategy inside my leather briefcase, I walk out onto the sagging front porch of the estate. The humid morning air clings to my skin. I look out over the 50 acres of overgrown marshland stretching toward the horizon. Cypress knees push through the dark soil like jagged teeth. Spanish moss drapes over the thick oak branches, casting long shadows across the untamed brush. To my family, this landscape is garbage. To me, it is a complex puzzle waiting to be solved. My parents always mocked my profession. Thomas viewed the real estate industry as a game of bullying tenants and flipping cheap condominiums for a quick profit. He wanted me to join his firm as a sales agent to push bad deals onto naive buyers. I refused his offer. I chose compliance and examination. I wanted to understand the immutable laws of dirt and property rights. He mocked my salary and called me a glorified librarian. He never grasped that controlling the paper trail is the ultimate form of leverage. I return to the kitchen and clear my wooden table. I open the heavy lockbox and carefully pull out the original property deeds. The paper is yellowed, fragile, and typed on a manual ribbon typewriter. I place the documents next to my laptop. I connect my computer to my mobile cellular hotspot and log into the secure county database using my professional portal. I type the parcel identification numbers into the search bar. Most people look at the surface-level tax assessments and stop there. I bypass the standard classifications and drill down into the historical archives. I scroll past decades of residential filings hunting for the foundational documents that define the true nature of the land. I find a scanned microfilm record filed 4 decades ago. It is a critical zoning variance granted by the county commission long before modern environmental protections locked down the region. The document permanently designates the central acreage of the estate for heavy industrial use. Procuring this type of variance today is a statistical impossibility. It is a grandfathered legal shield protecting the land from current regulatory interference. The zoning variance is only the first piece of the equation. I examine the mineral and hydrological attachments appended to the deed. The document outlines unrestricted commercial water rights. The decaying wooden house I am sitting in rests directly on top of a pristine natural underground aquifer. The volume of fresh water flowing beneath the floorboards is staggering. I open a secondary browser tab and access the regional development agendas. Tracking corporate real estate movements is a daily requirement in my profession. I remember a specific stalled initiative dominating the industry news over the past 2 years. A global beverage conglomerate has been attempting to penetrate the Central Florida market to build a state-of-the-art purification and bottling facility. The beverage company has the capital ready to deploy, but local regulatory agencies have blocked their every move. The corporation spent millions of dollars on lobbyists and public relations campaigns. They attended countless town hall meetings trying to sway the local government. Despite their efforts, the county refuses to issue new commercial water extraction permits. The corporation is suffocating in bureaucratic red tape. Their entire regional expansion strategy is paralyzed. I cross-referenced their proposed building coordinates with my parcel map. The beverage corporation is targeting land less than 5 miles away from my front door. Their billion-dollar industrial project is trapped in an endless legal purgatory. My 50-acre estate is the only parcel of land legally cleared for their exact operational needs. The grandfathered variance bypasses every single modern environmental hurdle blocking their path. The unlimited water rights provide the exact resource they require to operate the plant. The estate is not a burden. It is the missing puzzle piece for a multinational corporation holding an open checkbook. My grandmother did not leave me a rotting shack to teach me a lesson about hardship. She left me an active gold mine. She knew my profession would lead me to the hidden value of the soil. I sit back in my wooden chair. The implications ripple through my mind, reshaping the entire landscape of the impending courtroom battle. Thomas filed the civil lawsuit claiming I manipulated an elderly woman to steal a worthless swamp. But Thomas is a predator. Predators do not spend tens of thousands of dollars on premium probate attorneys to reclaim useless mud. He knows the true value of the land. A corporate land scout, working for the beverage conglomerate, likely traced the historical variance. The scout contacted my father, assuming he still managed the family portfolio. Thomas realized the swamp was a lottery ticket. He filed the urgent petition to invalidate my deed before I could comprehend the true value of the dirt under my feet. He is racing against the clock, trying to steal the asset and flip it to the corporation to save his own failing finances. I cannot just sit on the land. I need to weaponize it. I start compiling the geological surveys, the variance documents, and the verified water rights into a secure digital dossier. I scan the fragile original deeds, creating high-resolution copies. I build a pristine legal portfolio that proves my undeniable ownership and highlights the immense commercial capabilities of the property. I prepare to bypass my father entirely. I search the corporate database for the contact information of the lead acquisition executive at the beverage conglomerate. I isolate the direct phone numbers and draft a precise introductory email. I outline the parcel numbers and the grandfathered rights in clinical professional terms. I do not ask for a meeting. I inform them that the solution to their zoning problem is currently under my exclusive control. I am initiating a corporate bidding war while my father bleeds his bank accounts dry, preparing for a probate hearing. He thinks he is fighting a terrified daughter in a rural cabin. He does not realize he is competing against a trained examiner who holds the keys to a billion-dollar industrial expansion. I hit send on the email. I close the laptop lid and let the quiet humidity of the house settle around me. The pieces on the board are moving into striking position. The federal agents are tracking my brother's reckless spending in Miami. The probate judge is reviewing my father's fabricated medical affidavits. The international beverage executives are reading my verified land surveys. The phone on my kitchen counter begins to vibrate. The screen flashes an incoming call from an unfamiliar corporate phone number. The predators are circling the property, and the executives are taking the bait. I let the phone ring a second time, allowing the silence to steady my nerves. I reach out and slide my finger across the glass screen, ready to open the gate and let the real games begin. Senior Echo here, interrupting the narrative to point out how quickly the dynamic shifts when a manipulator realizes you possess something they want. We are going to explore how predators use financial abuse and manufactured concern to control their targets. Tell me in the comments down below what city you are tuning in from today. Have you ever watched a golden child receive everything while you were handed the scraps and told to be grateful? Let me know your experiences down below. Maria does not scream when her family hands her a crumbling house, or when her father suddenly decides to play the role of a loving parent. She knows raw emotion only gives manipulators the fuel they need to operate. She relies on the math. She relies on the paper trail. Toxic families bet on your emotional reactions to blind you to their financial maneuvers. Let us get back to the Florida marshland and watch a masterclass in holding boundaries. The incoming call from the unfamiliar corporate number connected me to a senior acquisition scout for the beverage conglomerate. The conversation was brief and clinical. I provided the parcel identification numbers and confirmed my legal ownership of the grandfathered commercial water rights. The scout requested time for their legal department to verify the historical documents and cross-reference the environmental surveys. I agreed and ended the call. A month passes in total silence. The humid Florida summer settles over the estate. I spend my days cataloging the structural repairs needed for the main house and preparing my evidence binders for the impending probate hearing. I record the peeling paint, the sagging roof joints, and the rusted plumbing fixtures. The quiet isolation of the swamp is a stark contrast to the chaotic environment I grew up in. During my childhood in Naples, silence was a weapon my parents used to enforce strict compliance. If I questioned a decision or pointed out a logical flaw in my father's business strategies, he would ignore my existence for weeks. He would speak over me at the dinner table and refuse to acknowledge my presence until I apologized for disrespecting his authority. He conditioned me to view his silence as a punishment. Now I view silence as a strategic advantage. It gives me the space to calculate my next move without interference. I use the quiet weeks to monitor public real estate registries, tracking my brother's erratic spending habits down in Miami as he drains the poisoned offshore accounts. On a Tuesday afternoon, I am sitting on the sagging front porch, reviewing a stack of property tax assessments. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and approaching rain. My cell phone vibrates against the wooden railing. I look at the glowing screen. The caller identification displays my father's name. Thomas Cook is not a man who calls just to check in. Every interaction he initiates is a calculated transaction designed to benefit his own ledger. I let the phone ring 3 times before swiping the screen to accept the call. I bring the device to my ear and wait. I do not offer a greeting. Maria, his voice comes through the speaker, sounding remarkably upbeat and light. The arrogant dismissal he displayed at the law office is gone. He replaces the hostility with a sickly sweet paternal warmth. "How is the rural life treating you, sweetie?" I stare out at the cypress trees. I keep my breathing slow and even. "I am fine," I reply. He sighs into the receiver, performing the role of a deeply concerned parent. "Your mother and I have been losing sleep worrying about you out there," he says. "We know the transition has been difficult. That old property is a severe financial burden for a single woman on a modest salary. We feel terrible that your grandmother saddled you with such a complicated mess." He pivots smoothly into his proposed solution. "The transition is flawless, practiced over decades of manipulating amateur real estate buyers. I want to help you get back on your feet," he tells me. "You should not have to drain your savings paying property taxes on a decaying swamp. I spoke with my accountant this morning. I am willing to buy the estate from you for $50,000 cash. We can draft the paperwork and close the deal by Friday. You can use the money to rent a nice apartment back in Naples and wash your hands of the entire headache. Consider it a favor from your father to a struggling daughter." I stand up from the porch chair. I lean against the wooden railing and process the layers of his manipulation. A month ago, he formally removed his name as a guarantor on my lease to ensure I faced immediate eviction. He wanted me to experience the desperation of poverty. Now he is offering a cash buyout disguised as an act of parental charity. My professional experience dealing with predatory commercial developers kicks in. The timeline is too precise to be a coincidence. The beverage corporation executive definitely began making discreet inquiries regarding the rural parcel following my email. A corporate land scout likely contacted my father's real estate firm, assuming Thomas still controlled the family portfolio. My father discovered the true commercial value of the land hidden beneath the overgrown vines. He learned about the grandfathered zoning variants and the unlimited water rights. He recognizes the estate is the key to a lucrative corporate acquisition. He wants to purchase the deed from me for pennies before I realize the immense power of what I possess. He thinks I am just a foolish girl sitting in a swamp, overwhelmed by the maintenance costs and the isolation. He assumes my modest salary as a title examiner means I am desperate for a quick $50,000 payout. He built his career in Naples lowballing vulnerable retirees and distressed homeowners. He is trying to run his standard playbook on his own flesh and blood. I keep my voice flat. I strip every ounce of emotion from my response. The property is not for sale, Thomas, I say. The silence on the line is immediate and profound. The sickly sweet paternal warmth vanishes like smoke. His breathing turns sharp and ragged. He tries to recover his footing, but the blunt rejection derails his carefully rehearsed script. Maria, you are not thinking clearly, he insists. The pitch of his voice rises. The underlying panic bleeds through his constructed facade. You do not understand the legal liabilities attached to that land. The county environmental regulations are a nightmare. You cannot navigate this bureaucratic maze on your own. Take the money and walk away before you ruin your credit score permanently. I do not argue with his flawed logic. I do not point out the hypocrisy of his sudden concern for my financial well-being. I do not reveal that I already contacted the beverage conglomerate or that I found the lockbox hidden beneath the floorboards. I give him nothing to work with. I said no, I repeat. Do not call me again. I end the call and place the phone face down on the wooden railing. I look out over the marshland, watching the dark storm clouds gather on the horizon. The desperation in his voice confirms that the trap is closing around him. He needs this land to save his own failing finances, and I just slam the door in his face. He will not accept defeat over a simple phone call. A manipulator deprived of their goal always escalates to physical intimidation. The phone call was just the opening maneuver, and the real confrontation is heading straight for my front porch. After disconnecting the call, I leave my phone resting on the kitchen counter. I know Thomas well enough to understand he will not accept a dialed rejection. During my teenage years, whenever I disagreed with his curfews or his academic demands, he never settled for a verbal argument. He would stand in my bedroom doorway, blocking the exit, and use his physical presence to force my submission. He believes his physical proximity carries an unspoken authority. By hanging up, I stripped him of his verbal control. That leaves him with only one remaining option to secure the real estate: a physical ambush. I spend the next 48 hours preparing for their arrival. I do not pace the floors or wring my hands in anxiety. I organize my digital files. I scan the latest property tax receipts and lock the original deeds back inside the steel lockbox. I prepare the environment for a calculated confrontation. 2 days later, the humid afternoon air hangs heavy over the marshland. I am standing on the sagging front porch, reviewing a stack of county zoning maps. A low mechanical hum cuts through the chirping of the cicadas. A sleek silver luxury sport utility vehicle turns off the main paved road and crunches onto my dirt driveway. The expensive car looks alien against the backdrop of peeling paint and overgrown palmetto bushes. The driver navigates the deep ruts, carefully trying to protect the premium suspension from the uneven terrain. The vehicle parks near the base of the wooden steps. The engine clicks off. The heavy doors swing open. Preston steps out of the passenger side first. He wears a pressed linen shirt and designer sunglasses. A heavy gold watch catches the sunlight on his left wrist. He looks around the yard with visible disgust, swiping at a mosquito buzzing near his ear. He views the rural landscape as a personal insult to his refined tastes. Growing up, Preston always treated manual labor or rural environments as beneath his station. If a household chore required sweating, my parents hired a contractor so their son would not ruin his hands. He walks toward the house with the swagger of a man who believes he is untouchable. He has no idea his recent wire transfers are currently sitting on the desk of a federal treasury agent. Cynthia emerges from the back seat next. She wears a pair of pristine white trousers and wedge sandals. She steps gingerly onto the dirt path, frowning at the dust settling on her expensive shoes. She clutches a designer handbag to her chest, as if the cypress trees might try to steal it. Finally, Thomas exits the driver's side. He wears a sharp charcoal suit jacket despite the sweltering heat. He grips a thick leather briefcase in his right hand. He does not look around the yard or inspect the decaying roof. His eyes lock directly onto me. They form a line and march up the wooden steps. The old wood groans under their combined weight. They carry themselves with the posture of landlords arriving to evict a troublesome tenant. They act as if they still dictate my choices and own my future. Thomas stops 3 feet away from me. He does not offer a greeting. He does not ask how my week has been. The fabricated paternal warmth from his recent phone call is entirely erased. He reverts to the tyrannical behavior he used to govern our household in Naples. He places his leather briefcase on a small wooden patio table. The brass latches click sharply as he snaps them open. He reaches inside and pulls out a crisp stack of legal documents printed on heavy stock paper. I recognize the formatting immediately. It is a standard Florida quitclaim deed. He holds the paper out toward me, along with a silver fountain pen. He tells me there has been a severe misunderstanding regarding my grandmother's final wishes. He claims the inclusion of this specific parcel in my name was a clerical error made by an incompetent paralegal at the probate firm. He states with supreme confidence that the rural estate was always intended to serve as a supplementary asset for Preston. He orders me to sign the bottom line to rectify the mistake before it causes any more administrative headaches for the family. I look at the quitclaim deed. As a title examiner, I know exactly what that specific document represents. A quitclaim deed offers no warranties of title. It simply transfers whatever interest the grantor holds directly to the grantee. It is the fastest way to strip a person of their property rights without triggering a formal title search. Thomas is insulting my professional intelligence by handing me this paper. He expects me to blindly sign away a commercial gold mine because he asked in a stern voice. I do not reach for the pen. I just look at the white paper trembling slightly in his grip. Cynthia senses the resistance and steps forward to flank him. She deploys her usual tactic of weaponized guilt. She crosses her arms over her silk blouse and shakes her head in performative disappointment. She tells me I am being unreasonable and stubborn. She claims Preston has very important investments currently underway, and he needs the liquid value of this land to secure his financial future. She reminds me that family must always support each other during crucial business transitions. Throughout my entire life, Cynthia used the concept of family duty as a one-way street. It meant I was required to sacrifice my comfort for their gain, but they were never expected to reciprocate. She demands I stop playing childish games and hand over the deed to end the unnecessary tension. Preston leans against the wooden porch railing. He offers a smug, patronizing smile. He tells me I am out of my depth trying to manage a piece of raw acreage. He says I should be grateful Thomas is willing to clean up the legal mess for me. He suggests I take the deed, sign it, and go back to my boring desk job in the city before I ruin my credit score dealing with county property taxes. He speaks to me as if I am a confused adolescent who accidentally wandered into a corporate boardroom. He stands on my porch bragging about his fake investments while wearing a watch purchased with stolen federal funds. I look at the three of them standing on my rotting porch. They drove 3 hours north to corner me in a swamp. They are demanding I surrender my only asset to fund their endless greed. Thomas thinks his loud voice and his expensive suit will intimidate me into submission. Cynthia thinks her manufactured disappointment will trigger my childhood desire for her approval. Preston thinks his mocking tone will shame me into giving up. They are running their standard psychological playbook on a woman who has spent the last month reviewing their impending financial destruction. The sheer arrogance of their ambush is breathtaking. I do not feel fear. I do not feel the urge to cry or argue. I feel a cold, clinical focus. I look at the silver pen in my father's hand. I look at the sweat beading on his forehead in the humid air. The desperation hiding beneath his commanding tone is palpable. He needs this signature to secure the beverage corporation buyout and save his own sinking finances. He is a predator who realizes the trap is empty, and he is trying to use brute force to drag his prey back into the cage. The tension on the porch reaches a breaking point as they wait for my compliance. The three of them stand on my rotting porch, waiting for me to surrender. The humid air presses down on us. The silence stretches. Thomas holds the silver pen forward, expecting me to take it. I look at the ink cartridge. I look at his manicured fingernails. I do not raise my hand. I do not offer a lengthy defense of my inheritance rights or try to explain the true commercial value of the aquifer resting beneath our feet. I keep my posture relaxed and my voice level. I tell him to pack up his paperwork. I tell him to get off my property. I give him exactly 30 seconds to walk back to his leased vehicle before I dial the county sheriff to report a trespass in progress. The shift in their expressions is immediate. Cynthia drops her posture of manufactured disappointment. Her mouth falls open in genuine shock. Preston stops leaning against the railing. He stands up straight, forgetting to maintain his smug indifference. Thomas looks at me as if I just spoke a foreign language. He is accustomed to commanding obedience through sheer physical presence. Defiance does not compute in his rigid worldview. The blood rushes to his face, turning his skin a dark shade of crimson. The veins along his jawline pulse. He realizes the intimidation tactic failed. He shoves the unsigned quitclaim deed back into his leather briefcase. The brass latches echo sharply in the quiet yard as he snaps them shut. He points a trembling finger inches from my face. He abandons the sophisticated businessman persona and unleashes the desperate predator beneath. He launches into a tirade of legal threats. He promises to drag me into civil court. He vows to hire the most ruthless probate firm in the state of Florida. He dictates his strategy right there on the porch, ensuring I understand the financial ruin he intends to inflict. He plans to contest the validity of the will by attacking my grandmother's mental competence. He claims he will procure medical experts to testify she suffered from severe dementia during her final months. He will frame me as a manipulative predator who isolated a sick elderly woman to steal her assets. He promises to tie the estate up in endless litigation. He says the legal retainers will drain my meager savings until I am forced into bankruptcy. He tells me I will lose the land and end up penniless. I watch him scream, and I remember a summer when I was 15 years old. Thomas hired a local roofing contractor to repair our Naples home. The contractor completed the job flawlessly, but Thomas refused to pay the final invoice, citing trivial cosmetic flaws. When the small business owner threatened to file a mechanic's lien, Thomas unleashed his corporate attorneys. He buried the contractor in endless deposition requests and frivolous paperwork until the man eventually folded and closed his company. Thomas treats the justice system like a bludgeon. He uses his bank account to exhaust his opponents until they surrender out of sheer financial fatigue. He assumes he can run the exact same play on his own daughter. Preston steps off the porch and lets out a sharp laugh. He adjusts his designer sunglasses and shakes his head. He tells me I am out of my league. He claims I am just a low-level clerk, trying to play a high-stakes game against seasoned professionals. He looks at my faded jeans, and then glances down at his own expensive watch. He tells me to enjoy the swamp while I still can, because the lawyers will take it all away by the end of the month. Cynthia follows him, retreating to the safety of the air-conditioned cabin. She refuses to look at me, treating me as a lost cause. Thomas lingers for a fraction of a second, trying to reassert his dominance through a final glaring stare. I do not blink. I do not step back. He turns and marches down the wooden steps. The heavy car doors slam shut. The engine revs high. The luxury sport utility vehicle speeds down the dirt road, kicking up a thick cloud of dust that coats the palmetto leaves and obscures their exit. I stand on the porch and watch the dust settle into the damp soil. They think the threat of a civil lawsuit will break my spirit. They assume I will spend the night pacing the hardwood floors, crippled by anxiety. They expect my phone call in the morning, begging for a settlement to avoid the courtroom. They fundamentally misunderstand the nature of my profession. I do not just file paperwork. I navigate complex property litigation for a living. I read civil dockets and appellate rulings over my morning coffee. I know the exact legal thresholds required to overturn a testamentary document in this jurisdiction. In the state of Florida, proving undue influence requires satisfying a very specific set of evidentiary factors. You must prove the beneficiary actively procured the will. You must prove a confidential relationship existed to the exclusion of others. I know a judge requires undeniable empirical evidence to invalidate a deed, not just the loud complaints of a wealthy father. Furthermore, I hold a structural advantage Thomas fails to recognize. He expects a war of attrition. He thinks he can outspend me on legal fees. But I do not have a mortgage on this estate. My overhead is negligible. I do not need to hire a premium defense firm because I possess the specialized knowledge to draft the motions myself. Thomas will be paying a senior partner $500 an hour to file baseless claims while I dismantle his arguments for the cost of printer ink. I walk back inside the house and engage the deadbolt on the heavy wooden door. The familiar silence of the marshland returns to the rooms. I clear my kitchen table and open my laptop. I connect to my cellular hotspot and pull the digital templates for civil defense filings. I am not intimidated by his threats, because I spend my days auditing the mistakes made by arrogant attorneys. I pull the original property deeds from the lockbox and spread them across the table. I trace the chain of title with my index finger, ensuring every signature is notarized and every seal is intact. A title examiner looks for defects in the chain. A missed signature or a faulty legal description can unravel an entire transaction. My grandmother's paperwork is flawless. She executed the transfer with clinical precision. Thomas will likely try to file a lis pendens against the property to cloud the title. It is a standard bullying tactic designed to prevent a homeowner from selling or refinancing the land while the litigation is pending. He wants to cut off my access to capital. I anticipate the maneuver and draft a motion to dissolve the notice before he even files it. I build my defense step by step, anticipating his aggressive strategies and neutralizing them with strict adherence to procedural law. I know how to counter a fabricated dementia claim. I have the certified medical evaluations locked in the steel box. My grandmother anticipated this exact maneuver. She visited a reputable neurologist 3 days before finalizing the deed. She secured a pristine cognitive assessment proving her undeniable mental competence. Thomas is walking into a concrete wall of medical evidence. My father is spending his energy preparing a baseless lawsuit over a patch of rural wetlands. He is blind to the larger board. He is ignoring the offshore shell companies and the federal tax liabilities resting squarely on Preston's shoulders. He is so focused on stealing my inheritance that he fails to monitor his own son's financial exposure. While I organize my evidence binders, I think about Preston cruising down Ocean Drive in a financed luxury vehicle. He believes the $7 million sitting in his offshore accounts makes him invincible. He thinks wealth provides a shield against consequences. He is unaware that the federal government treats tax evasion with ruthless efficiency. The offshore shell companies my grandmother set up were flagged years ago. The penalties have compounded into an insurmountable debt. Preston is not a millionaire. He is a high-priority target for the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. The legal war over the swamp is just a distraction. The real devastation is already in motion down in Miami. My brother is funneling dirty money into domestic channels to fund his new lifestyle. He is buying sports cars and placing down payments on luxury condominiums. Every dollar he spends acts as a tracking beacon for the Treasury Department. The Internal Revenue Service does not issue polite warnings. They issue asset freezes and federal indictments. I set my laptop aside and watch the rain begin to fall outside my kitchen window. The drops hit the tin roof with a steady rhythmic drumming. My family thinks they left me isolated and vulnerable in the storm. They do not realize I am the one controlling the weather. The civil lawsuit will be the anvil and the federal audit will be the hammer. I sit back in my chair and wait for the process server to arrive. The opening shots of the war have been fired, and the predators are about to learn what happens when the prey fights back with paperwork instead of emotion. I walk back inside the house and engage the deadbolt on the heavy wooden door. The familiar silence of the marshland returns to the rooms. I clear my kitchen table and open my laptop. I connect to my cellular hotspot and pull the digital templates for civil defense filings. I am not intimidated by his threats because I spend my days auditing the mistakes made by arrogant attorneys. I prepare my defense knowing they are walking into a slaughter. A week passes in quiet isolation. The humid Florida weather breaks, allowing a brief window of cool air to settle over the estate. On a Thursday afternoon, a faded silver sedan crunches up the dirt driveway. A man wearing a wrinkled short-sleeved button-down shirt steps out of the vehicle. He wipes the sweat from his forehead and walks up the wooden steps. He asks to confirm my identity. I nod. He hands me a thick manila envelope and returns to his car without another word. The process server did his job. I take the envelope into the kitchen and break the seal. I slide the legal petition across the table. Thomas hired a premium probate firm in Naples just as he promised. The document is 50 pages of fabricated narrative. The attorneys outline a strategy designed to invalidate the property transfer. They claim my grandmother lacked testamentary capacity during her final months. They allege I isolated a sick elderly woman and manipulated her into altering the deed to the rural estate. The petition includes a sworn affidavit from a hired medical consultant who never even met my grandmother. My father intends to bury me under a mountain of expensive legal motions. He wants to drain my modest savings, forcing me to hire a defense attorney I cannot afford. He assumes the financial pressure will force me to surrender the land to him in a pretrial settlement. He treats me like one of his hostile business acquisitions. He is looking the wrong way. He is pouring his remaining resources into stealing a patch of rural wetlands while standing directly on a financial landmine. I do not panic. I do not call a defense attorney. I plan to represent myself. I spend the weekend drafting my legal response. I gather the verified land surveys proving my clean title. I retrieve the certified medical evaluation my grandmother completed just days before her passing. The evaluation was conducted by a reputable neurologist, proving her undeniable mental competence. I place the medical records, the property deeds, and the handwritten letter into a sleek leather briefcase. My defense is a fortress of empirical evidence. While Thomas focuses all his energy on stealing my land, the federal government finally arrives to collect their dues. For the past 2 months, Preston treated South Beach like his personal playground. He believed the $7 million sitting in his offshore accounts made him invincible. He assumed wealth provided a shield against consequences. He is unaware that the federal government treats tax evasion with ruthless efficiency. Preston leased a high-floor condominium overlooking the ocean. He walked into a luxury dealership and drove out in a custom sports car. To fund this extravagant lifestyle, he initiated wire transfers from the offshore accounts my grandmother set up. He did not use a tax attorney. He did not filter the capital through legitimate business holdings. He just wired 7 figures directly into a domestic checking account. That kind of digital movement is a glowing beacon to the Treasury Department. The algorithms designed to catch money laundering flagged his transactions within hours of the first wire. Every dollar he spent acted as a tracking device for the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. The federal government moves slowly until it strikes. On a Thursday morning, Preston attempts to pay for a premium table at a private club. The waiter returns and informs him his card declined. Preston scoffs, blaming a banking error. He pulls up his financial application on his phone. The screen does not show his $7 million balance. It shows a series of red restricted codes. His accounts are locked. He leaves the club and drives to a local bank branch demanding to speak to a manager. He expects to use his arrogant charm to resolve the issue. The branch manager looks at the computer monitor and refuses to make eye contact. The manager informs him that a federal hold is active on his social security number. Agents froze every single bank account tied to his name earlier that morning. The offshore shell companies collapsed under the scrutiny. The Treasury Department dismantled the blind trusts my grandmother established decades ago. The Internal Revenue Service issued a formal assessment based on years of unpaid compliance notices. Preston receives a formal notice delivered to his luxury condominium. The document outlines his legal liability. He owes the federal government $9 million in back taxes and fraud penalties. The inherited wealth is gone. The $7 million evaporated, replaced by a crushing, inescapable debt. He is not a millionaire. He is a high-priority target for a federal prosecution. The devastation does not stop with my brother. Thomas and Cynthia created this monster by enabling his financial incompetence. When Preston wanted the Miami condominium and the sports car, his lack of employment history became an obstacle. Standard underwriting software rejects applicants with no verifiable income regardless of their offshore claims. So Thomas and Cynthia did what they always did. They co-signed the loans. They attached their pristine Naples credit profiles to his new luxury assets. They guaranteed his extravagant purchases, because they believed the inheritance was secure. When the federal agents froze Preston's portfolio, they followed the signatures. The Internal Revenue Service placed immediate holds on my parents' personal checking and savings accounts. Their credit cards stopped working at the local grocery store. Their country club auto pay bounced. In a single morning, the illusion of the Cook family fortune evaporated. Because Thomas and Cynthia are listed as co-signers, their personal accounts are frozen as well. The wealth they spent decades accumulating through predatory real estate deals is locked behind a federal firewall. Thomas is sitting in his mahogany-paneled office in Naples preparing to bankrupt me over a swamp. He does not yet realize he cannot even afford to pay the premium probate attorneys he just hired. The civil lawsuit he filed is a luxury he can no longer finance. My family spent their entire lives treating me like a disposable burden while they chased unearned wealth. Now they are drowning in a federal crisis, and there is no one left to save them. The legal war over the estate is just beginning, but the financial foundation of my opposition is already reduced to ash. I sit at my kitchen table and place the final signed motion into my briefcase. The court date is approaching, and I am ready to watch them face the reality they worked so hard to avoid. Senior Echo here stepping in to remind you that true revenge is clinical. It is cold and mathematical. You do not need to scream when you hold all the receipts. Tell me in the comments down below what city you are tuning in from today. Have you ever had to bring physical evidence to shut down a manipulator? Let me know your experiences. Toxic people rely on your emotional reaction to distract from their actions. They want you to cry and yell so they can label you unstable. Maria understands this dynamic perfectly. She knows that stepping into a courtroom against her parents requires a steady heart and an organized briefcase. Let us head into the Naples courthouse and watch a flawless execution of legal boundaries. The probate hearing takes place in a sterile courtroom in downtown Naples. The walls are lined with pale oak panels, and the air conditioning keeps the room at a crisp, uncomfortable temperature. I arrive early and take my seat alone at the defense table. I do not pace the aisles or nervously review a legal pad. My sleek leather briefcase rests on the dark wood in front of me. I watch the heavy double doors at the back of the gallery waiting for my opposition to arrive. Thomas and Cynthia walk through the doors a few minutes before the judge is scheduled to take the bench. The contrast between their appearance this morning and the day of the will reading is staggering. The federal asset freeze enacted just days prior has already taken a visible physical toll. Cynthia wears a designer dress, but her posture is slumped. She lacks her usual polished aura. Her face is drawn and pale. Thomas walks with a heavy, rigid step. His charcoal suit hangs loosely on his frame. Their credit cards are declining at gas stations and grocery stores. The terrifying reality of their federal audit is finally setting in. They sit down at the plaintiff table looking exhausted and panicked. They are trying to fight a war on two fronts. They are battling the Internal Revenue Service in Miami while trying to steal a swamp in Naples. The strain of spinning those plates is eating them alive. Their expensive lawyer stands up to organize his files. He is a senior partner at a premium firm wearing a custom suit and an expensive watch. He looks at me with a practiced expression of polite disdain. He assumes I am a terrified young woman who could not afford legal representation. He assumes this hearing will be a brief formality before I surrender the property deed. The bailiff announces the judge. We all stand and then take our seats. The hearing commences. The expensive lawyer approaches the podium. He opens his file and begins his opening statement. He paces in front of the bench projecting authority. He attempts to build a narrative where I am a predatory daughter. He argues that I isolated my grandmother during her final weeks and manipulated her into altering her will. He claims my grandmother was a fragile woman suffering from advanced cognitive decline. He points toward me and calls the rural estate a suspicious transfer executed under extreme duress. He relies heavily on the sworn affidavit from his hired medical consultant. He speaks eloquently, trying to substitute volume and confidence for empirical truth. He talks about the tragic decline of the elderly and paints Thomas as a grieving son, trying to protect his mother's true legacy. He paints a masterpiece of fabricated victimhood. I listen to his entire argument without raising a single objection. I do not roll my eyes or shake my head. I sit perfectly still and let him build his house of cards. When the lawyer finishes his lengthy speech, he returns to the plaintiff table. Thomas offers him a tight nod of approval, believing the performance secured their victory. The judge looks down at me from the elevated bench. He asks if I have a response to the petition. I stand up from the defense table. I pick up my leather briefcase and walk toward the bench. I do not bring notes or a prepared speech. I open the brass latches and pull out a thin manila folder. I hand the judge the original property deed. I explain calmly that the chain of title is flawless, and the signature was notarized by an independent third party outside the presence of any family members. Then I pull out the second document. I present the certified medical evaluation. I inform the court that my grandmother anticipated this exact legal maneuver. I state for the record that she completed a comprehensive neurological assessment just 3 days before executing the property transfer. I hand the original assessment to the clerk and slide a duplicate copy across the plaintiff table. The expensive lawyer picks up the copy. His eyes scan the heading and drop to the signature of the attending neurologist. The doctor is a highly respected specialist in the Naples medical community. The lawyer reads the paragraphs detailing my grandmother's sharp lucidity. The report explicitly documents her spatial awareness, her memory recall, and her firm grasp of her financial portfolio. The final paragraph of the medical evaluation is the most devastating. The neurologist noted my grandmother's explicitly stated desire to protect the rural estate from her son because she feared his predatory business practices. The plaintiff attorney stops moving. The blood drains from his face. He realizes he has been fed a fabricated narrative by his own client. In the legal profession, presenting knowingly false medical claims is a severe ethical violation that can trigger an inquiry from the State Bar Association. The lawyer realizes Thomas used him to launder a lie. The attorney drops the paper onto the table and sits down heavily in his chair. He does not offer a rebuttal. He does not attempt to cross-examine the document. He abandons Thomas right there in the sterile room to save his own professional license. The courtroom falls completely silent as the judge reviews the undeniable physical evidence. The only sound is the quiet hum of the overhead ventilation system. The judge reads the medical report line by line. He looks at the independent notary seal on the property deed. Thomas and Cynthia sit frozen at their table. They watch their expensive legal strategy disintegrate in a matter of seconds. The lies they spent weeks crafting evaporate under the harsh fluorescent lights. Thomas grips the edge of the wooden table. His knuckles turn white. He realizes his money cannot buy his way out of a certified medical fact. His attrition strategy is dead. He expected me to ask for continuances and drown in procedural paperwork. Presenting the silver bullet immediately strips him of his ability to drag the fight out. I stand perfectly still at the defense table. I let the cold, hard facts dismantle their entire foundation of lies without ever raising my voice. I do not show a single ounce of fear or hesitation. I do not look at my parents with anger or vindictive joy. I look at them with the clinical detachment of an examiner crossing an invalid claim off a ledger. The judge lowers the paperwork. His demeanor shifts from neutral observation to visible irritation. He directs a sharp glare toward the plaintiff table. He recognizes a frivolous lawsuit designed to harass a family member. He understands that the medical affidavit Thomas provided was a paid fiction. The civil case is dead in the water. The judge reaches for his gavel, preparing to issue a ruling that will legally block my father from ever contesting the deed again. Thomas slumps in his chair, staring at the wood grain. He knows he has lost the rural estate and the hidden commercial value resting beneath it. But losing the swamp is the least of his problems. The courtroom doors remain closed, keeping the quiet tension trapped inside. My parents are so focused on the collapse of their civil lawsuit, they are completely unaware of the perimeter forming outside the building. The judge is preparing to dismiss the case, but the real danger is waiting for them in the hallway. The federal consequences of Preston's offshore spending spree have finally caught up to the Naples courthouse, and the sanctuary of the legal system is about to shatter. I reach into my leather briefcase one last time. I pull out the final piece of evidence. It is the handwritten letter I found hidden inside the steel lockbox beneath the floorboards of the estate. The paper is slightly yellowed around the edges. The blue ink bears the distinct, elegant loops of my grandmother's cursive handwriting. I hand it to the clerk, who passes it up to the elevated bench. I state for the record that the document outlines the decedent's explicit intent regarding the rural parcel. The judge unfolds the paper. The courtroom remains trapped in a suffocating quiet. The only sound is the rustle of the thick paper turning in the judge's hands. The letter leaves no room for interpretation. My grandmother detailed her exact knowledge of my father's financial maneuvering. She wrote that Thomas spent his entire adult life attempting to siphon her assets to fund his own volatile business ventures. She explicitly stated she was leaving the 50-acre estate to me because she trusted my professional integrity to protect the land from his boundless greed. She noted her fear that if Thomas gained control of the acreage, he would exploit it and leave her legacy in ruins. The judge finishes reading the final paragraph. He looks over the rim of his glasses down at the plaintiff table. The neutral judicial detachment vanishes from his face. His expression hardens into profound disgust. He recognizes the malicious nature of the lawsuit resting in front of him. Thomas brought a fabricated case into a court of law to steal an inheritance from his own daughter while trying to drag his deceased mother's name through the mud. The judge sees the predatory reality hiding behind my father's expensive suit. The judge does not ask for closing arguments. He strikes his wooden gavel against the sounding block. He announces his ruling with a sharp, cutting tone. The petition is dismissed with prejudice. The ruling means my father is permanently barred from ever filing another claim against my deed. The judge goes further. He formally sanctions Thomas for filing a frivolous petition and wasting the court's time. He orders my father to pay the administrative costs of the hearing and issues a stern warning about abusing the judicial system for personal gain. Thomas sits frozen in his wooden chair. His shoulders cave inward. The crisp charcoal suit looks like a hollow shell resting on his frame. In a single afternoon, his expensive legal attrition strategy dissolved into dust. He lost the 50-acre marshland. He lost the hidden commercial aquifer. He incurred a legal penalty he currently has no way to pay due to his frozen accounts. The fortune he thought he could steal slipped through his fingers forever, leaving him with nothing but mounting debts. The premium probate attorney packs his files with frantic speed. He snaps his briefcase shut. He does not shake my father's hand or offer any parting advice on how to handle the sanctions. He rushes down the center aisle, eager to distance himself from a toxic client. Cynthia stares blankly at the polished table. Her weaponized guilt has no target here. I snap the brass latches of my briefcase closed. I do not smile. I do not linger to gloat or demand an apology. The math is settled. I turn and walk out the heavy double doors into the wide marble corridor of the courthouse. The dismissal of the civil lawsuit is merely the opening act of their nightmare. As I walk down the long hallway toward the exit, I see Preston standing near the security checkpoint. He skipped the hearing, assuming his presence was unnecessary, and the victory was assured. He leans against a stone pillar, checking his expensive watch. He wears his designer sunglasses indoors, projecting his usual unearned arrogance. He expects Thomas to emerge holding a signed settlement turning my land over to the family portfolio. Thomas and Cynthia emerge from the courtroom behind me. Their footsteps echo weakly against the tile. Before they can reach Preston, two men detach themselves from the flow of foot traffic. They wear unremarkable dark suits and carry themselves with a distinct, rigid posture. They do not look like local law enforcement or courthouse security. They carry the clinical aura of federal agents. They step into Preston's path, blocking his exit to the street. One of the men reaches into his breast pocket and flips open a leather credential case. He identifies himself as an investigator for the Treasury Department. He addresses Preston directly. He requests an immediate interview regarding a series of flagged offshore financial transfers and domestic wire routing anomalies. The designer sunglasses slip down Preston's nose. The arrogant smirk vanishes. The blood drains from his face, leaving his skin a sickly pale shade. He looks like a terrified boy caught in a lie. He spent his entire life insulated from consequences by his parents' checkbook. He lived under the delusion that wealth provided immunity from the rules governing the rest of society. Now he is standing in a public courthouse lobby, facing the full weight of the United States government. He opens his mouth, but his voice fails him. He looks frantically over the agent's shoulders toward my parents, begging for a rescue. Thomas sees his golden child cornered. The paternal instinct to control the narrative overrides his current shock. He rushes forward, inserting himself between his son and the federal investigators. He puffs out his chest, trying to summon the tyrannical businessman persona. He demands to know what is going on. He raises his voice, insisting his son has done nothing wrong and threatening to call his corporate attorneys to shut down the harassment. He attempts to bully the federal agents the same way he bullies local contractors. The second agent turns his attention to Thomas. The investigator does not flinch at the raised voice. He does not step back. He simply pulls a secondary folded document from his jacket. He informs Thomas that his presence is actually quite convenient. The agent states that Thomas and Cynthia Cook are also required to submit to formal questioning. The investigator explains the scope of the active probe. The Treasury Department mapped the financial network tied to the collapsed shell companies. When Preston funneled the dirty offshore funds into domestic channels, he needed co-signers to bypass standard underwriting algorithms for his luxury purchases. Thomas and Cynthia attached their names and their pristine Naples credit profiles to those transactions. They intertwined their own financial identities with the fraudulent capital. They guaranteed loans built on stolen tax money. The agent states on the public record that my parents are under active investigation for their direct involvement in facilitating tax evasion and structuring illicit funds. The words hang in the air of the crowded courthouse lobby. Other lawyers, clerks, and local business owners pause their conversations to watch the scene unfold. The Naples high society circle is a small insular world. Gossip moves faster than the wind. The social standing my parents spent decades curating evaporates in a matter of seconds. The illusion of their untouchable wealth shatters right there on the marble floor. Cynthia presses her hand against her chest, struggling to draw a full breath. She realizes the charity galas and the country club dinners are gone forever. No reputable member of the local elite will risk associating with a family targeted by a federal financial crimes unit. The reputation they worshipped is now a toxic liability. Thomas lowers his hands. His commanding presence shrinks until he looks like a frail, defeated man. The realization of his total ruin washes over him. He cannot buy his way out of a federal indictment. His bank accounts are already frozen and his credit is destroyed. He has no leverage left to wield against anyone. The empire he built on manipulation and greed has collapsed under its own weight. I stand near the heavy glass exit doors and watch the agents escort my family toward the interrogation rooms. I do not offer a wave goodbye. I push the door open and step out into the bright Florida sunlight. The storm has finally broken over their heads. I leave the courthouse behind because I have a much more lucrative appointment waiting for me in Orlando, and my final negotiation is about to begin. Naples, Florida operates on a strict social currency. Wealth serves as the baseline requirement, but reputation dictates true survival. In those pristine gated communities, a rumor can sever a career before breakfast. The news of the federal intervention at the courthouse travels through the affluent zip codes with staggering speed. My parents dedicated their adult lives to cultivating an image of untouchable success. They hosted charity galas and purchased imported vehicles simply to ensure their neighbors understood their rank. That entire carefully curated facade crumbles before the sun sets on the day of the probate hearing. The local country club board of directors does not wait for a formal indictment to act. They hold a discreet emergency meeting in a private dining hall. A courier arrives at my parents' front door the very next morning carrying a sealed envelope. The letter inside is brief and clinical. It informs Thomas and Cynthia that their exclusive membership is revoked effective immediately. The board cites conduct detrimental to the institution. There is no negotiation and there is no appeal process. The gates are permanently locked. Cynthia attempts to salvage her standing through sheer denial. She picks up her phone and dials the women she hosted for lavish luncheons just weeks prior. She expects their loyalty. She expects them to rally around her and offer sympathy for the legal misunderstanding. She calls number after number. Every single dialed line rings a few times and drops straight to a generic voicemail. Her wealthy associates read the local business columns. They understand the severity of a Treasury Department probe. In their specific tier of society, an Internal Revenue Service investigation carries a heavy taint. No one wants to risk a federal subpoena by associating with a targeted family. Cynthia sits in her curated living room holding a silent phone, realizing she is entirely alone. The social isolation is only the precursor to the financial reckoning. Thomas spends 48 hours calling elite white-collar defense firms across the state. He expects to hire a premium legal team on credit. He sits in a plush office across from a seasoned federal defense attorney and learns a harsh lesson about criminal prosecution. Federal lawyers do not work on installment plans or verbal promises. They require severe upfront retainers. The attorney looks at my father's frozen bank accounts and demands a liquid payment. Because Thomas co-signed Preston's luxury loans, the government locked his domestic cash reserves. He has no access to the funds he spent decades extracting from vulnerable real estate clients. His only remaining exempt asset is the primary residence. He returns to the pristine Naples estate and breaks the news to Cynthia. They have to liquidate the house to afford a legal defense. 2 days later, a real estate agent hammers a bright wooden sign into their manicured front lawn. The humiliation is swift. Neighbors slow their vehicles as they drive past the property, pointing at the sign and whispering. The house goes on the market well below its appraised value because Thomas needs the capital immediately to keep his son out of a holding cell. The sanctuary they built to project their superiority is sold off to pay for their crimes. While my parents pack their belongings into cardboard boxes, Preston faces the sterile machinery of the justice system. The Treasury agents do not care about his designer clothing or his country club pedigree. They summon him to a federal processing facility in Miami. The unearned arrogance is wiped clean from his face. He walks through a metal detector and sits across a steel table from seasoned investigators. They place a document in front of him, demanding the immediate surrender of his passport. He is deemed a flight risk due to his ties to offshore banking structures. He hands the small blue booklet across the table, severing his ability to flee the country. He signs paperwork acknowledging his travel restrictions. He returns to his high-floor luxury condominium just in time to watch the repo trucks arrive. The federal asset freeze triggered automatic default clauses in his recent financing agreements. A heavy hydraulic lift hooks the front tires of his imported sports car. He stands on the sidewalk watching the tow truck haul the vehicle away. The Miami lifestyle he purchased with stolen tax funds evaporates into thin air. The golden child who laughed at my inheritance now faces the looming shadow of a federal prison sentence. He is grounded, stripped bare, and waiting for a prosecutor to determine his fate. They spent their entire lives treating me like a disposable burden while they chased unearned wealth. They discarded me at the will reading and tried to render me homeless. Now they are drowning in a crisis of their own making, and there is no one left to save them. I do not feel a single ounce of pity for their collapse. They engineered their own demise. I leave the Naples courthouse behind and merge onto the northbound highway. I drive away from the affluent coastal city and head back toward the rural interior. I watch the landscape shift from manicured palm trees to dense, untamed cypress groves. The tension that settled in my shoulders over the past month melts away with every mile marker I pass. The ledger is balancing itself. I arrive at the estate in the late afternoon. The decaying wooden house stands quietly in the humid marshland. The sagging porch and the peeling paint no longer look like a burden. They look like a brilliant disguise. The structure served its purpose flawlessly. It hid the treasure from the predators until the rightful owner arrived to claim it. I walk through the front door and head straight for my kitchen table. I do not need to stay in the swamp any longer. The trap is sprung and the defense is won. I pack my belongings. I open the heavy steel lockbox and remove the critical documents. I place the original property deed inside a crisp waterproof folder. I retrieve the verified land surveys, the county topographical maps, and the grandfathered zoning variants. I ensure the deed outlining the unlimited commercial water rights is securely tucked behind the surveys. I slide the folders into my leather briefcase and snap the brass latches shut. I pull out my laptop and navigate to a travel booking portal. I bypass the budget motels and find a premium business hotel located in the financial district of Central Orlando. I book a corner suite on an executive floor. I enter my credit card information and receive the confirmation email. I load my luggage and my briefcase into the trunk of my sedan. I lock the heavy wooden door of the estate one final time. I walk down the wooden steps and get into my car. The engine turns over with a steady hum. I drive down the dirt path, leaving the palmetto bushes and the Spanish moss in my rearview mirror. The drive to Orlando takes 2 hours. The rural wetlands gradually give way to smooth paved highways and towering glass structures. The environment shifts from isolation to commerce. I navigate the busy city streets and pull into the valet lane of the hotel. A staff member opens my door and takes my keys. I carry my briefcase through the polished marble lobby. The air conditioning is crisp and the atmosphere buzzes with professional energy. I take the elevator to the top floor and enter my suite. The room features a large glass desk overlooking the sprawling cityscape. I place my briefcase on the desk. I am no longer a target dodging abusive family members in a swamp. I am a trained commercial examiner holding a priceless asset. My ultimate financial freedom is just one boardroom negotiation away from becoming a permanent reality. The beverage conglomerate executives are expecting a frightened novice who stumbled into a fortunate zoning variance. They plan to use their corporate intimidation tactics to lowball the purchase price. They assume they can overwhelm me with legal jargon and aggressive contract clauses. I look out the window at the city lights turning on across the horizon. I am ready to step into their arena and show them exactly how a real transaction is executed. I wake up before dawn in the corner suite of the Orlando Hotel. The city below is quiet and dark. I order black coffee from room service and lay my clothing out on the bed. I choose a sharp gray suit with clean, structured lines. It is the armor I wear when auditing hostile property claims and dismantling fraudulent contracts. I review my physical evidence one final time. The chain of title is flawless. The hydrological surveys are verified. The grandfathered zoning variance rests inside a protective sleeve. I am carrying the exact legal mechanism a global corporation has spent 2 years trying to manufacture. I place the documents into my leather briefcase and wait for the sun to rise. The drive to the corporate headquarters of the international beverage conglomerate takes 15 minutes. The building is a towering monument of glass and steel piercing the morning sky. I hand my keys to the valet and walk through the revolving doors. The lobby smells of expensive floor wax and filtered air. A security guard checks my identification and issues a visitor badge. I step into a private elevator and press the button for the executive floor. The doors slide open to reveal a pristine reception area. An administrative assistant guides me down a long hallway lined with abstract art and silent offices. The assistant opens a set of frosted glass doors. The boardroom features panoramic windows overlooking the sprawling urban landscape. A polished glass table stretches across the center of the room. 3 men sit on the opposite side. The lead acquisition director wears a bespoke navy suit and a silk tie. To his right sits the chief legal counsel surrounded by thick binders of environmental regulations and county zoning maps. On his left is a senior hydrologist holding a digital tablet. They stand up when I enter the room, but their posture is rigid. They offer tight, practiced smiles. They spend their days crushing rural landowners and extracting resources for fractions of their true worth. They expect me to be intimidated by the altitude and the corporate machinery. I take my seat across from them. I place my leather briefcase on the transparent glass surface. The brass latches catch the fluorescent light. The acquisition director folds his hands on the table. He begins a rehearsed speech designed to lower my expectations. He talks about the complexities of Central Florida real estate. He mentions the heavy burden of rural property taxes and the severe ecological restrictions placed on wetland development. He is trying to frame my estate as a liability. He wants me to feel desperate so he can offer a lowball purchase price disguised as a favor. I let him speak for exactly 2 minutes. I observe his cadence and his practiced eye contact. When he pauses to take a breath, I reach forward and unlatch my briefcase. The sharp metallic clicks interrupt his monologue. I do not engage in small talk. I do not nod in agreement or apologize for interrupting his presentation. I pull out the crisp waterproof folders. I slide the verified land surveys across the smooth glass. The documents come to rest directly in front of the chief legal counsel. I tell them the history lesson is over. I state that I am aware of their 2-year lobbying campaign in my county. I know they spent millions of dollars trying to sway local politicians and town hall meetings to secure a commercial water extraction permit. I know the county regulators blocked their every move. I slide the next document across the table. It is the original commercial variance granted 4 decades ago, along with the unlimited water rights deed. I inform them that the solution to their bureaucratic nightmare is sitting right in front of them. The chief legal counsel picks up the yellowed paper. He slips his reading glasses onto his nose. I watch his eyes track across the typewritten text. The air in the room turns heavy. The hydrologist leans over his shoulder, staring at the topographical coordinates listed on the deed. The legal counsel traces the municipal seals and the notarized signatures with his index finger. He understands the profound implications of the grandfathered clauses. The variance bypasses every single modern environmental hurdle blocking their industrial project. It provides unrestricted access to the pristine aquifer resting beneath my rotting wooden porch. The color drains from the lawyer's face. He looks up at the acquisition director and offers a slow, deliberate nod. The silent communication confirms everything. The document is ironclad. It is a legal fortress built long before the current zoning laws existed. The corporation no longer needs to fight the county regulators. They just need to acquire my deed. The patronizing tone vanishes from the room. The acquisition director adjusts his silk tie and sits up straight. He looks at me with sudden, intense focus. The dynamic shifts from a predatory hunt to a high-stakes negotiation. The director clears his throat. He asks what kind of partnership I am seeking. He suggests a structured payout over 10 years, or a fractional lease agreement based on water extraction volume. He is trying to retain control of the capital. I interlock my fingers and lean forward. I do not ask for a negotiation because I hold all the leverage. I dictate the terms of the agreement cleanly and professionally. I offer them the entire 50-acre estate and the exclusive rights to the underlying aquifer. I demand a single lump sum payment wired directly to my accounts upon closing. I refuse any structured payouts or ongoing lease liabilities. I want a clean severing of ties. The executives fall silent. They look at me with profound professional respect. They realize they are not dealing with a naive girl from the swamp hoping for a modest payday. They are dealing with a trained title examiner who understands exactly how to extract maximum value from a pristine commercial asset. I know the exact financial weight of the time I am saving them. I know the value of bypassing years of expensive legal battles and red tape. The director does not offer a counterproposal. He knows any delay might prompt me to contact their direct competitors. The director reaches for his desk phone. He presses a single button and summons the senior drafting team to the boardroom. He looks across the glass table and agrees to my terms. The acquisition is moving forward. But verbal agreements hold no weight in commercial real estate. The true test of my endurance is about to begin. The corporate lawyers will try to bury escape clauses and liability shifts deep within the acquisition paperwork. I must audit every single line of their contract before I sign my name and surrender my leverage. The final battle for my financial freedom will be fought in the fine print. The corporate drafting team enters the boardroom carrying sleek laptops and portable printers. They set up a makeshift legal department right on the glass table. The junior attorneys type furiously, adjusting the standard acquisition templates to reflect my specific terms. They print the thick stack of documents and slide the contract across the table. They assume I will skim the boilerplate language and rush to the signature page. They assume the promise of a staggering payout will blind me to the details. They are mistaken. I open the binder and begin reading every single line. My background in title examination trained me to find the trapdoors hidden within dense legal jargon. I read the warranties and the covenants. I scrutinize the easements. On page 42, I locate a subtle discrepancy. It is a liability shift clause, attempting to hold the seller responsible for any unforeseen ecological remediation discovered during the initial excavation phase. The language is buried inside a paragraph regarding standard soil testing. The hydrologist shifts uncomfortably in his chair as my finger pauses on the page. If I sign that specific paragraph, I remain tethered to their industrial risks long after the funds clear. I slide the document back to the chief legal counsel and tap the paper with my index finger. I instruct him to strike the clause entirely, or the acquisition ends today. The lawyer glances at the acquisition director. The director offers a curt nod of concession. The legal team deletes the paragraph and reprints the page. The structural trap is neutralized. I take the silver pen provided by the firm and sign the final transfer documents. The friction of the pen against the paper is a physical manifestation of my definitive financial independence. I hand the binder back to the executives. We do not shake hands. The transaction is clinical and precise. I stand up and walk out of the glass tower. The Florida heat hits me as I step onto the concrete pavement, but it feels different today. The humidity does not feel oppressive. I walk toward my hotel thinking about the woman who orchestrated this entire sequence of events. My grandmother grew up working in agricultural supply chains. She learned early that men wearing expensive suits often try to steal the fruits of your labor through complex paperwork. I remember a specific afternoon when I was 12 years old. I watched her audit a bank statement with a magnifying glass at the kitchen table. Thomas walked into the room and dismissed her efforts, calling her paranoid. He treated her like a fragile artifact, ignoring her sharp intellect. He assumed she was oblivious to his constant financial draining because she rarely raised her voice. He was profoundly wrong. She designed the perfect distribution of wealth. She handed the greedy predators the exact illusion of a fortune they craved, knowing their own arrogance would ultimately destroy them. She gave the discarded daughter the quiet hidden asset that secured a permanent legacy. The scales of justice were balanced by a woman sitting quietly in a rocking chair, observing the toxicity of her own son. She used the law to execute a flawless judgment from beyond the grave. The corporate buyout clears my bank account on a Tuesday morning. I am sitting in a quiet coffee shop near the hotel when the encrypted notification chimes on my phone. The ambient noise of espresso machines and morning conversations fades into the background. I open the banking portal. I bypass the standard checking interface and navigate to the newly established private wealth management tier. The final transfer totals $25 million. I stare at the digital numbers glowing on the screen. There is no confetti falling from the ceiling. There is no loud celebration. There is only the quiet, undeniable power of personal autonomy. For my entire adult life, my parents used money as a leash. They co-signed my apartment lease to maintain leverage over my housing. They threatened my credit score to enforce compliance with their demands. They used financial insecurity to keep me obedient. That leash is now permanently severed. I hold more liquid capital than Thomas generated in his entire career. I will never answer to a landlord again. I will never rely on a corporate salary to survive. I close the application and finish my dark roast coffee. The bitter taste grounds me in the present moment. I return to the hotel and pack my few remaining belongings. I check out at the front desk and retrieve my sedan from the valet. I merge onto the southbound interstate, heading back down to Naples one final time. I need to retrieve a few personal items from a rented storage unit near my old apartment. I want to collect the last fragments of my past before I relocate permanently out of state. The drive takes several hours. The landscape shifts from the rural wetlands of central Florida back to the dense coastal sprawl. The tropical air rushing through the car vents feels clean. It is no longer thick with the suffocating weight of my parents' expectations. I do not feel the desperate childhood need for their validation. The radio news cycles over the past few days detailed the fallout of their choices. The dust has settled on the federal indictments. The Treasury Department formally charged Preston with tax evasion and wire fraud. He is currently awaiting trial without the option of bail due to his offshore flight risks. Thomas and Cynthia are named as unindicted co-conspirators, fighting to keep their remaining assets out of federal forfeiture. The Cook family name is disgraced in the affluent coastal community they worshipped. The society pages that once featured their charity dinners now run articles analyzing their impending bankruptcy. My name is finally my own again, untethered from their sinking ship. I take the familiar exit into Naples. The pristine coastal city looks different to me now. The manicured palm trees and the perfectly paved medians look like a cheap theatrical set designed to hide the rot beneath the surface. I navigate the busy streets heading toward the industrial district where my storage unit is located. I decide to stop at a commercial plaza to purchase heavy moving boxes and packing tape. I turn my sedan into the parking lot of a discount grocery store. It is a rundown establishment far outside the affluent zip codes my family used to frequent. The asphalt is cracked and faded. I find a parking space near the back of the lot. I turn off the engine and step out into the sweltering afternoon air. I am preparing to walk into the store to buy my supplies and leave this city forever. As I walk toward the sliding glass doors, the rhythmic squeak of a rusted wheel catches my attention. I look toward the cart return corral. I notice a familiar figure moving sluggishly near the line of metal baskets. The legal war is over, but the emotional closure is standing right in front of me. I pause on the hot asphalt as the final ghost of my past comes into focus, and my ultimate test of detachment is about to begin. The rusted wheels of a shopping cart squeak across the faded asphalt. The harsh metallic sound cuts through the heavy afternoon humidity of the discount grocery store parking lot. I stop walking. I stand near the front bumper of my sedan and watch a man struggling to load groceries into the trunk of a dented rental car. The man is hunched over. His shoulders are rounded and his movements are remarkably slow. He hoists a heavy bulk bag of cheap white rice over the rear bumper, struggling with the awkward weight. I recognize the profile before he even turns around. It is Thomas Cook. The physical transformation is jarring. Just a few weeks ago, he stood on my wooden porch in a tailored charcoal suit, trying to intimidate me into surrendering a commercial aquifer. Today, the expensive imported wool is gone. He is wearing a faded cotton polo shirt that hangs loosely on his thinning frame. The fabric is wrinkled and stained near the collar. The heavy silver watch he used to check during boring meetings is missing from his left wrist, likely pawned to pay a retainer for a federal defense attorney. Growing up, Thomas demanded perfection in every public setting. He refused to shop at standard supermarkets. He insisted Cynthia source their groceries from premium organic boutiques and specialized butchers. He would loudly berate a clerk if his imported coffee beans were not roasted to his exact specifications. He treated retail workers as a captive audience for his superiority complex. He believed his bank account entitled him to flawless service and universal deference. Now he is sweating in a discount plaza, loading generic canned goods and bulk rice into a compact vehicle. The Treasury agents froze his domestic accounts and stripped him of his credit lines. The reality of a federal investigation means he cannot borrow money from his former business associates. He is living on whatever exempt cash reserves his attorneys managed to secure for basic living expenses. The tyrant who controlled Naples' real estate is surviving on a strict, unglamorous budget. He closes the trunk of the rental car and turns around. He wipes a bead of sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. His gaze sweeps across the parking lot and stops abruptly. He sees me standing 20 feet away. He freezes in his tracks. The plastic grocery bag in his left hand rustles in the slight breeze. I can see the gears turning behind his tired eyes. He knows exactly why I am in town. The commercial real estate transaction did not happen in a vacuum. When a multinational beverage conglomerate acquires 50 acres of rural marshland and secures unlimited water rights, the regional business journals publish the details. The corporate buyout made the front page of the Naples financial paper on Monday morning. Thomas reads those papers religiously. He knows the exact terms of the deal. He knows I orchestrated a single lump sum payment. He knows I currently possess more liquid capital than he generated during his entire 40-year career. He is staring at a daughter who holds a $25 million fortune, while he struggles to afford his weekly groceries. For a fraction of a second, the old Thomas flickers across his face. A brief flash of resentment tightens his jaw. He hates that I won the game he tried to rig. But the resentment is quickly swallowed by raw desperation. The impending federal trial and the mounting legal debts have crushed his pride. He takes a hesitant step toward me. His posture shifts into a submissive stance. He opens his mouth to speak. I know exactly what he wants to say. He wants to leverage the biological connection. He wants to play the role of the broken father. He hopes I will feel a sudden surge of pity. He assumes I will offer a generous loan to help him pay his legal fees, or secure a better defense attorney for Preston. He expects me to engage. He expects me to stop and offer a frown of disappointment or a smile of vindictive triumph. A manipulator feeds on any emotional reaction. If I gloat, he will use my cruelty to paint himself as a victim. If I show pity, he will exploit my empathy to extract a financial favor. He is waiting for me to open the door just a crack so he can force his way back into my life. I do not open the door. I do not stop walking. I maintain a steady, even stride across the hot asphalt. I keep my eyes focused straight ahead. I do not offer a smile. I do not offer a frown. I do not utter a single word of recognition. As I pass him, I look right through him. I focus my attention on the flickering neon sign hanging above the grocery store entrance. I treat him with the exact same clinical indifference I would give a discarded receipt blowing across the pavement. The silence is a physical weapon. By refusing to acknowledge his existence, I deprive him of the very oxygen he needs to survive. He thrives on conflict. He thrives on attention. Ignoring him erases his power entirely. I can hear the sharp intake of his breath as I walk past him. I do not turn my head to check his reaction. I do not break my stride. I reach the sliding glass doors of the store and step onto the automated sensory mat. The doors part with a soft mechanical hum. The blast of cold air conditioning washes over my face. I grab a red plastic shopping basket from the stack near the entrance. I walk down the first aisle, scanning the shelves for heavy-duty packing tape and cardboard boxes. My heart rate is resting at a steady, predictable rhythm. My hands are not shaking. My palms are dry. I select 3 rolls of industrial tape and place them into my basket. The mundane nature of the errand grounds me in the present moment. I am not running from a ghost. I am simply purchasing supplies for a relocation. I walk toward the checkout registers. Through the large plate glass windows at the front of the store, I catch a brief glimpse of the parking lot. Thomas is still standing by the trunk of his rented sedan. He is staring at the automatic doors. His shoulders are slumped forward. The physical toll of the rejection is visible even from a distance. He lowers his head, staring down at his scuffed shoes. The profound shame radiates from his posture. He realizes his daughter did not even consider him worth a passing glance. He is irrelevant to my future. He opens the driver's side door and slides into the cramped seat. The compact car pulls out of the parking space and merges slowly into the afternoon traffic, disappearing into the coastal haze. I place my items on the conveyor belt and hand my credit card to the cashier. The transaction clears instantly. I carry my plastic bag out of the store and walk back to my sedan. I load the supplies into the passenger seat and start the engine. As I drive out of this parking lot, the true magnitude of my victory settles into my bones. The real triumph of the last month is not the corporate buyout. The $25 million resting in my private wealth account is a phenomenal asset. It guarantees my physical comfort and provides an impenetrable shield against financial extortion. It ensures I will never have to compromise my integrity to secure a paycheck. But the ultimate power is not the money. The ultimate power is the psychological severing of the leash. For 28 years, my internal compass was magnetized to my parents' approval. I structured my career choices and my daily habits around avoiding their criticism or chasing their fleeting validation. I allowed their rigid standards to dictate my self-worth. When they handed me the keys to a decaying swamp, they intended to confirm my lack of value. They intended to break me. Instead, they handed me the exact tools I needed to audit their deception. Seeing Thomas in the parking lot stripped away the final lingering shadow of my childhood. I looked at the man who used to terrify me with a single disappointed glare, and I felt nothing. The emotional tether is permanently severed. I no longer need his approval. I no longer crave his love. I do not care if he spends the rest of his life in a federal penitentiary or living in a cramped rental apartment. His fate is disconnected from my trajectory. I navigate the vehicle toward the industrial storage facility. The Florida sun begins to dip toward the horizon, casting a warm golden light over the commercial buildings. In my profession, a clean title means a property is free of liens or encumbrances. The title to my own life is finally clean. The encumbrances of my family have been dissolved. The toxic narrative they wrote for me is officially shredded, and the ink is dry on my new reality. I am stepping out of the swamp and into a future I built with my own hands. I am completely and permanently free. What a breathtaking conclusion. Senior Echo here, wrapping up Maria's incredible journey of vindication. This story proves that true value is rarely visible on the surface. We just witnessed a masterclass in emotional detachment and strategic planning. Let us break down the exact mechanics of this family dynamic and why the predators ultimately choked on their own toxicity. Thomas and Cynthia operated under the assumption that wealth dictates reality. They raised Preston to believe his surname provided an impenetrable shield against consequence. They chose the flashy $7 million because they were blinded by their own greed. They saw a digital balance on a piece of paper and ignored the foundational structure of those offshore accounts. They ended up destroying their own empire because they never bothered to read the fine print. Narcissists rarely do. They are so focused on the reflection in the mirror, they forget to check if the floor beneath them is stable. Preston saw luxury vehicles and Miami real estate. He did not see the federal algorithms tracking every single digital wire transfer. Maria chose the decaying house and uncovered a $25 million empire. But she did not just stumble into a fortune by accident. She engineered her victory using the exact skills her father mocked. Thomas insulted her profession because he valued loud intimidation over quiet competence. He thought a title examiner was just a glorified clerk. Maria proved that reading the fine print is the most dangerous weapon a person can wield in modern society. She understood that commercial zoning laws and hydrological surveys hold more weight than a bespoke suit or a raised voice. She did not waste her energy fighting them in the mud. She did not stand on that rotting porch and scream for an apology when her family tried to corner her. She understood that demanding an apology from a predator is like asking a snake to explain why it bites. It is a waste of breath. Toxic families bet on your emotional reactions to blind you to their financial maneuvers. They want you to cry and yell so they can label you unstable. Maria deprived them of that satisfaction. She used her professional skills, gathered the undeniable receipts, and let the federal government handle the trash. Let us look closer at Cynthia and her weaponized guilt. Throughout Maria's life, Cynthia played the role of the long-suffering mother. She tried to use sighing and performative disappointment to force compliance. She expected Maria to sacrifice her own stability to fund Preston's delusions. When Cynthia stood on that rotting porch and demanded the deed, she relied on a lifetime of emotional conditioning. She expected Maria to fold simply to restore the peace. But cold hard facts do not respond to guilt trips. A commercial zoning variance does not care if your mother pretends her blood pressure is rising. Maria neutralized Cynthia's primary weapon simply by refusing to participate in the manufactured drama. Then there is Thomas. He believed his physical proximity carried an unspoken authority. He thought driving 3 hours north in a leased luxury vehicle would trigger Maria's childhood fear. He tried to substitute volume for legal standing. He assumed that waving a silver pen and threatening a civil lawsuit would bypass the need for an actual title search. He treated the justice system like a bludgeon, assuming he could exhaust his daughter into surrendering. He failed to comprehend that a title examiner spends every working hour dismantling frivolous claims and exposing fraudulent paperwork. Thomas brought a loud voice to a paper fight. He lost the estate and his entire fortune in a single afternoon because he underestimated the quiet girl sitting across from him. Think about the poetic justice of her strategy. She did not have to hire an expensive lawyer to destroy her brother. Preston destroyed himself by spending stolen tax money on imported sports cars. The Internal Revenue Service does not care about your country club membership or your tailored shirts. Treasury agents operate on mathematical deficits and frozen assets. Maria simply stepped out of the way and allowed the federal machinery to run its natural course. The parking lot scene outside the discount grocery store is perhaps the most profound moment in this entire narrative. Let us discuss the concept of closure. Society often tells us that closure requires a final conversation. We are taught that we must sit down with our abusers and force them to understand our pain. Maria shatters that myth entirely. When she saw Thomas loading generic bags of rice into a rented sedan, she did not stop to gloat. She did not offer a smirk or a frown. She looked right past him. Indifference is the ultimate closure. Hate is still a form of attachment. Hate requires energy. By ignoring his existence, she reclaimed all her energy and left him to sit alone in his profound shame. If you have ever been the scapegoat in your family, you know how exhausting it is to constantly prove your worth. You spend your entire life trying to translate your value into a language your parents refuse to speak. Maria's story teaches us that you must stop trying to translate your worth for people committed to misunderstanding you. Remember, your worth is not defined by the people who discard you. Sometimes being cut out of the family narrative is the greatest gift you can receive. It removes the heavy expectations and the constant criticism. It leaves you entirely free to write your own ending on a blank page. We also must acknowledge the genius of the grandmother. She watched the moral decay of her own son and decided to enact a final judgment from beyond the grave. She weaponized her estate. She handed the golden child a loaded debt and handed the discarded daughter a hidden commercial aquifer. She balanced the scales using property laws and tax codes. It is a beautiful reminder that justice often requires patience and meticulous planning. She knew her family better than they knew themselves. She knew Preston would fall for the poison chalice because arrogance always underestimates quiet intelligence. Maria driving away from Naples represents a physical and psychological liberation. The tropical air rushing through her car vents was no longer thick with the suffocating weight of parental expectations. The dust settled on the federal indictments, and her name was finally her own again. She looked at her banking portal and felt the quiet, undeniable power of personal autonomy. Financial independence is the ultimate boundary. It ensures you never have to compromise your integrity to secure a roof over your head. It means you never have to answer a phone call from someone who views you as a disposable resource. If you loved watching Maria turn a swamp into a fortune, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of ultimate justice. Our community thrives on these narratives of resilience and accountability. I want to hear from you in the comments section. Have you ever discovered a hidden truth that changed everything in your family dynamic? Did you ever find a document or a piece of evidence that shattered a carefully constructed lie? Drop your story down below. I read every single response, and I love seeing how you all navigate these complex situations. Setting boundaries is an act of self-preservation. When you realize the people supposed to protect you are actually plotting your downfall, you must become your own defender. Do not rely on their sudden displays of manufactured warmth. Do not fall for the fake parental concern when they realize you possess something they want. Keep building your boundaries. Keep auditing the lies people try to sell you. And never apologize for securing your own future. You owe nothing to the people who tried to leave you with nothing. See you in the next one. I am standing in my new Orlando office looking out at the city skyline. The $25 million in my account is a phenomenal asset, but the greatest lesson I learned is that true power does not come from wealth. True power is realizing you no longer need the approval of the people who tried to destroy you. You must stop translating your worth for those committed to misunderstanding you. Thank you for listening to my journey. If you found strength in my victory, please hit the like button and subscribe to Senior Echo Stories for more incredible narratives.